Welcome. This is Learning to Listen, Conversations for Change, and I'm Joshua Sparrow at the Brazelton Touchpoint Center. To find out more about the Brazelton Touchpoint Center and Learning to Listen, just go to brazeltontouchpoints.org and click on Learn with Us and look for Learning to Listen in the Conversations section. There's also a link there to our archive of Learning to Listen conversations where today's conversation will appear as well. To learn more about Brazelton Touchpoint Center conversations, events, and trainings, click on the link in the chat. To join the Brazelton Touchpoint Center's Learning Network, look for that link in the chat. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are bringing you Amanda Mustard, documentary filmmaker, photojournalist, and co-director of Great Photo, Lovely Life, and Luke Malone, journalist and co-author of One in Five and co-director of Great Photo, Lovely Life, for an illuminating conversation about the hurdles and benefits of speaking openly about child sexual abuse. The discussion will explore how secrecy fuels harm and why making the private public can actually help prevent abuse before it occurs. But first, a bit of information about today's Learning to Listen episode. Over 1,700 of us have registered for today's webinar. Please do let us know about you, where you're from, and what you do in the chat. It's great to see you all here. Today, our superb interpreter, Natalia Correa, joining us from Bogota, Colombia, will be simultaneously translating our webinar into Spanish. Thank you, Natalia. To access the translation, click on the interpretation icon in your Zoom controls, then select Spanish. To mute the English in the background, select Mute Original Audio. La conversación de hoy será en español y inglés. En los controles de esta reunión, haga clic en interpretación, haga clic en el idioma que le gustaría escuchar. Para escuchar solo español, haga clic en silenciar audio original. Live captioning is available for today's conversation. In your webinar controls, click Show Captions and select your speaking language. To adjust the size of your subtitles, click Caption Settings. And remember, please use the chat feature if you have a comment to share or need help with a technical issue. And please share your questions with us in the Q&A box. If you'd like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, please be sure you complete the feedback survey. That survey will open in your web browser when this webinar ends, and you'll also receive a link to the survey at the end of this week in our thank you email to you from us. I want to be sure to thank our sponsor, the Burke Foundation, and our Brazelton Touchpoint Center production team, Isabella Mantilla, Michael Accardi, and Nora Nwogu. Now, before we start, I want to be sure to say that for those of us who have experienced sexual abuse and/or assault, what we're going to talk about today hopefully will be validating and even enlightening, but it may also, of course, be hard to hear and to watch. So we encourage you to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourselves. And now I'd like to introduce today's guests, Amanda Mustard and Luke Malone. Amanda Mustard is an award-winning photojournalist and filmmaker raised on a Pennsylvania Christmas tree farm. Shaped by personal experiences of adventure and adversity, her work is driven by curiosity and compassion. She spent a decade based in Cairo and Bangkok covering stories for the New York Times, National Geographic, and Time magazine, among others. Amanda recently made her directorial debut with her twice Emmy-nominated documentary, Great Photo, Lovely Life, which premiered theatrically at South by Southwest before making its TV premiere on HBO, where it continues to stream for audiences here and internationally. And I can't urge you enough to tune in and watch the entire documentary. We will see some clips from it a little later today. And Luke Malone, co-director of Great Photo, Lovely Life, is an Emmy-nominated journalist who has reported on sexual abuse for 15 years. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, and more. He co-authored the upcoming book, One in Five, Why Child Sexual Abuse is Our Biggest Public Health Crisis and What We Can Do to Stop It, co-authored with Dr. Elizabeth Letourneau, and he was a co-producer of Great Photo, Lovely Life. Again, the documentary is streaming on HBO Max, and there will be a link in the chat both about the film and about Luke Malone's book One in Five. I think you'll soon discover why it is such an incredible honor, and we are so privileged to have Amanda Mustard and Luke Malone joining us today. Thank you so much, Amanda and Luke. Let's start, Amanda, by having you orient us to the clips from the film that we're going to see, which actually was an op doc in the New York Times, and then we'll go to you, Luke, before we roll the op doc clip.
Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be here, and thank you, Josh, for inviting us. Yes, I'm the director of Great Photo, Lovely Life. I directed it with my co-director, Rachel Beth Anderson. And it took 8 years, I'll say, to make this film, and it started in my early 20s, where I was a conflict photographer living in Egypt, experiencing an immense amount of sexual assault, and that was causing a lot of stress and trauma in my life, and that it really came to a physical head for me. I had a small stroke at 24 and really realized that I needed to start looking at what I was carrying. And within that was recognizing that I had been very, very normalized to the fact that my grandfather had been a child sexual abuser, and had abused almost every child in my family, and many in the church and many through his chiropractic practice. So this was not something I didn't necessarily know, I just had normalized it. So this film was a kind of enormous art therapy way for me to denormalize myself and to start talking about it for the first time. This was the first time that anyone in my family had ever been asked anything about their experience. So and it was really important for me in this process to make sure that it was focused on prevention and what can we actually do to avoid this to begin with? What could have my family been spared by, of if we could have gotten ahead of it. So, and that's where I met Luke, who had a This American Life piece around 2014 that was really, really seminal. And I'll let him speak on that. But now he was the producer on this film with me.
Yeah. And just to clarify, thanks, Amanda. And just to clarify, yeah, I was not the co-director, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, but Rachel and Amanda did a fantastic job. I was co-producer. I don't want to overstate my involvement in the film. But yeah, I mean, I think like as Amanda mentioned, like we met in we always get this wrong, 2016, I think, 2015.
14, 15, 16, something.
Sometime in the mid whatever they are teens. But yeah, I had done a story in that came out in 2014, and that kind of started my career trajectory in this area. I've been a journalist for a long time before that. But I did a story that appeared on This American Life and then also a print piece in Medium that looked at a group of young, self-identified, non-offending pedophiles. And I say non-offending with quotes because pedophilic disorder is a disorder, not an action. And yeah, so I had an interest in prevention and looking at what we can do to intervene before harm occurs. The piece did really well. I think just the novel nature of it helped it do really well. It kind of resonated with a lot of people who were naturally very curious, including, but anyone from survivors to parents across the board. Anyway, so when Amanda reached out to me, we to talk about the film that she had just started putting together. You've been shooting for maybe a couple years at that stage, a year or two, Amanda. Something really stood out to me, and I think it's relevant for today's conversation, is that even though I had been kind of working in this area for a couple of years and dealing with people who were at risk of causing harm, I'd never seen. There were two interviews that had been main interviews that had been filmed. One was Amanda speaking to her grandfather very plainly about the abuse he had perpetrated. Um, Plainly and kind of clear-eyed about it, not kind of shying away from the seriousness of the situation, but to see least of all a granddaughter and a grandfather, but just two human beings having a direct conversation about this was extremely interesting to me, and also just very novel in the sense that I'd never seen that. And then more importantly, for me, is that like I feel like there were conversation for people who've seen the film. There's a scene between Amanda's mother and her sister, both of whom were abused by her grandfather. And just kind of looking at the dynamics of what happens in a family when abuse occurs within a family, we so often focus on the abusive incident, rightly so. But no, it has a very long tail and it affects families, has a ripple effect that goes on for lifetimes and sometimes generations. And so seeing these two dynamics play out in the film was just really captivating and wanted me to become involved. And so, as Amanda said, we wanted to also come at this through the lens of prevention, not just make this like a true crime documentary, kind of chronicling Grandpa Flickinger, different name, Amanda's grandfather, all the crimes that he committed, detected and undetected. But really just look kind of trying, at least not shoehorn, but trying just to introduce the element of prevention. He's done these terrible things. It's not trying to excuse it, but what could there be done if not for Grandpa, for people today who are at risk of causing harm? And safe to say, the film got some pretty strong reactions.
Thank you, Luke. So we'll come back to the possibilities for prevention in our discussion later. Before doing that, I just wanted to be sure we all understand when you talk about, you said air quotes, non-offending pedophiles, you mean people who are struggling with urges to have sexual interactions with children, but who have
Mhm.
never acted on those urges, right? That's what
Yes.
by not, okay.
No, Fendi, and also just very quickly, just to further clarify that as well, I think sometimes there's this idea that people with pedophilic disorder are predestined to offend, and many people certainly do, obviously, but it's not a prerequisite. I mean, it's not, it's not a guarantee to have pedophilic disorder. If you're diagnosed with pedophilic disorder or have a sexual interest in children, does not guarantee you're going to act on that. And through my reporting and some of the research I've done, and through Amanda's film, some of the work we've done together, excuse me. I've met many people with a sexual attraction to kids who vehemently do not want to act on that attraction.
Thank you. And then the other thing that I just wanted to lift up from what you said, Luke, was the long tail for families, and that the focus, as you said, is often on the act or the acts, but not on the reverberations for all of the family members in one generation and often in many generations beyond. So, is there more before we take a look at the clips from this documentary that you'd like to say before we roll that, Amanda or Luke?
Sure. So what we're going to show is a piece that we just finished and released in January. It's the baby film to the mother HBO film. The reaction to the feature film was so strong and very indicative of kind of where we are at as a society talking about this. So we made an opinion documentary for the Times that kind of says a lot of the things that we couldn't say word for word in the film. It's quite well-rounded, so we're very excited to share that here.
Thank you. And that, I must say, is how I discovered the film, was through that OpDoc piece. And I'm so glad that you answered my email so that we can be here today to share this really important work with everybody who's joined today. Isabella, if we can now take a look at the video.
People keep telling me that I should have killed my grandpa.
This is my granddaughter, Amanda. Hello, gorgeous.
Hi, Grandpa.
Come on in.
How are you doing?
Good to see you, baby.
Why? Because he was a serial sexual abuser of children, some of them in my own family. And I spent 8 years making a documentary about it to show what an absolute train wreck this all could be. I brought family secrets to the surface. I connected with his victims.
This started when I was 4 years old.
I even confronted him directly.
Can I ask how old she was?
Where she started? I think she started around the age of 9 through 11.
My film brought out some strong opinions. Nothing provokes us like child sexual abuse, and I get it. That rage is totally valid. But my story has taught me that if we really want to protect kids, then we need to confront a painful truth.
Hi there, little lady.
Hi there.
How you doing? I lost my little dog. Can you help me find him?
This is how our culture has taught us to think about child sexual abuse.
Stranger danger.
It is a terrifying thing for any parent to think about.
There are monsters out there hunting your kids.
Pedophilia is a wicked and sadistic practice.
Why don't you have a seat right over there?
And they are better off dead.
This man is here to meet a 13-year-old boy.
People are now assaulting predators in public. Slap that man!
Videotaped beating him.
And I, for one, think it's an amazing thing.
Shoot them in the face.
Bang, 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 bang. Justice is meted out. Let's all go out and have some lunch.
In my family, that monster was Grandpa, Dad. How amazing would it be if you could just throw Grandpa in a wood chipper? But it's not that simple when it's somebody close.
My abuser was my father.
My dad.
My grandfather.
Grandfather.
My uncle. It is my older brother.
He was my brother.
He was a family member of mine.
A friend of the family.
Neighbor kid I grew up with.
My dad's best friend.
My family's story might seem extreme, but child sexual abuse is way more common than we think. 15% of American adults today are child sexual abuse survivors, and 90% of them were abused by someone they know, maybe someone they loved.
He was one of the primary people in my life that I was supposed to be able to trust.
He always seemed to be like assisting my family, buying me the best toys.
How could he be a terrible person? Look at all these people that adore him.
The truth is, abusers usually look more like this than this. It would be so much easier if they were strangers or monsters, because with monsters, you can just do this. The reality is much more uncomfortable.
That's the hardest part is the fact that you love them.
We were living in the same home, and I also looked up to him.
Some of the parts of me that I love and value the most are parts that I inherited from him. So it's just so painful and confusing that he also did this really harmful, horrific thing to me.
I don't like it. You're probably not going to like it. But these aren't monsters. They're humans that have done monstrous things. And if we can accept that, we can actually start to prevent this and stop more kids from getting abused.
For every person we have interviewed, pedophilia is an unwanted attraction. It is not a choice.
Take it from one of the world's leading experts on child sexual abuse.
The choice is to not offend against a child. It is in our interest to applaud and to support that choice.
Was there anybody that you ever felt like you could talk to about it? Did you ever open up?
I wished I could have. I really did wish I wanted to talk to somebody, but I didn't know who I could really talk to.
What if there had been somebody he could talk to? Imagine how different things could have been for my family. In the US, we spend $5.4 billion a year on locking child abusers up, and only $3 million on child sexual abuse prevention research. Now, let me be crystal clear. I'm not asking you to have sympathy for sexual predators. Of course, we need to hold perpetrators criminally accountable. But my grandpa went to prison, and nothing changed. He continued to abuse after he was released. So we also need to give those at risk of abusing every opportunity to prevent them from hurting kids. There are post-prison reentry programs that have been shown to reduce recidivism by up to 50%. And even programs that help prevent abuse in the first place. But they need more funding and more reach.
Physically abusing an offender will just perpetuate trauma. They need support too. They need mental health support.
And to get people who harm into treatment programs that can ensure they are not able to harm again, or to ensure they won't harm to begin with.
So, as uncomfortable as it was, instead of killing Grandpa, I talked to him.
Grandpa, I just need you to listen to me for a second. I'm listening.
I was nervous. It was terrifying, but it made me realize that nothing is going to change unless we confront this reality head on. When we treat abusers like monsters, two things happen. One, we focus solely on humiliation and punishment instead of prevention and treatment, and that is not keeping our kids safe. And two, we diminish the complex experiences of survivors. This stops us from being able to really hear their voices and what they need.
What would make it easier for survivors? Talking about it.
I wish it was like a topic of conversation.
I was worried about what people would think about me. How would they treat me? Would my relationships change?
It felt like nobody wanted to help me out, to be there for me, except they want to shove me to a therapist and, they wouldn't really want to discuss it.
It makes us feel like pariahs, like we don't have a place in society. And then it prevents us from being able to heal.
As soon as we can break the stigma, make these conversations more normalized, that's when the change can start.
Wow. So hard. So, how are you both doing? Huh.
Amanda?
I mean, I am actually doing very well in my life, big picture. I really, it was excruciating making this film, but it helped me unbury myself, I think, a lot from from the intergenerational trauma in my family, and it's just given me this freedom to live without all of that weighing me down. So it's a huge testament to doing the work and, facing these terrible things. It has really, really freed me in a way that I can continue talking about this and continue pushing for this awareness.
And also, oh,
God, I just say, just lifting up, unburying myself.
Mhm.
I'm going to remember that. Go ahead, Luke. Sorry.
no, of course. Yeah, and also just like thanks to Amanda as well for giving people. There are a lot of survivors that appear in that op doc. That appear in the major documentary, the op doc. There are probably many survivors, victims slash survivors, however one wants to describe themselves in this room. And I think it's really important, and this kind of goes to something we might talk about later, is that, both Amanda's willingness to delve into her personal history and, places like HBO and New York Times, place platforms with massive reach being kind of willing to talk about this in a nuanced way, like allows not only for, Amanda to kind of do it on a personal level, but it opens up the floor for a lot of people to kind of speak their own truths, which I think is really important.
Thank you, Luke. I know a lot of our people who have tuned in today, and I can imagine that many are wondering, what are we doing? What do we need to do to create safety as such a thing as possible, to be able to have this conversation? Are there places where, it's helpful for, we will and won't go, or there are other things that you've learned that you would like everyone to know we're going to respect today in terms of having this conversation?
I'm very open. I think it is the strange superpower this has given me. And really, I doubt that there's a question somebody can ask that I haven't navigated already.
Yeah, you've been doing this work. Yeah, how about you, Luke?
No, exactly the same. I've been doing this, and also like I don't have as much kind of personal skin in the game in the sense that my personal history is not on display. Not that I'm against that, but I'm a very much an open book. So I'm happy to kind of talk about anything and everything that people want to ask or share.
So, so moving forward, to support our conversation today, are there other things in the film that what we just saw doesn't get to, that you'd like to sort of put out for people, knowing we might need spoiler alerts? Maybe we'll go to you first, Luke.
Gosh, again, I touched upon it briefly before we saw that video, but again, it's just something that I keep coming back to is that for me, Amanda is the protagonist, but there are many protagonists, but I think the dynamic and that you spoke to as well, Joshua, is the family dynamics between, again, Amanda's mother, Debbie, and her sister, kind of trying their best to unthread the complexity of that relationship that they have. Like her mother was abused, her sister was abused. I don't want to spoil too much, but that's obviously a point of conflict in that Amanda's sister was put in a position where she was able to be abused, and just the kind of I don't kind of blame Debbie per se. She made some pretty terrible decisions, but maybe the only one she thought she could do at the time. Anyway, there's just dynamics in the film that kind of talk about abuse directly, but then also talk about the kind of the complex kind of ecosystem around it. And again, it's just something that I'd never seen before, and I'm super proud to have been involved in a project that explores something that is so prevalent. There's so many people in this room. If you weren't abused directly, most of us know somebody who was abused, perhaps in one's own family. So it's something that truly affects everybody. And so I'm extremely proud to have been associated with something that explores kind of the multifaceted nature of that.
And you may know someone who was sexually abused as a child who doesn't remember it themselves right now, or who may not have been able to talk about it. Because so much of this film is about the silence and how pervasive that is, but how destructive that is. You also mentioned, Luke, the blame, and that is something that, predictably comes up. It may be part of what people are trying to avoid with the silence. It may not be the place where people end up. And you may have more to say, Amanda, about what's in the film that you want to say to ground this conversation. But I also wanted to go to you, picking up on what Luke just said, to say, what do you see as the source of your capacity for compassion? Because even in that short piece, that's part of what you're asking for,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But first, tell us if there are other things in the film you want us to know to ground this conversation. Then, if you could tell us more about where do you see that coming from?
Oh my God, so much therapy, Josh. Truly. The fleet of therapists I had to get me through this process. It was a real-time journey of finding these answers for myself. That's what the film is you're watching me and my family figure this out and try to talk about it for the first time. And, you know, my mom and I were a team, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but as we kind of dug deeper and were asking these questions, we kind of realized that there was some blame that could be had. There was some accountability that my mom needed to have, about the putting my sister in a position where she was abused. It got messy, and that's the reality of these situations. And I had never seen that on film, which is why I wanted to make this. I wanted to contribute something that people could feel seen in, because I was like, surely we're not the only ones navigating this. Um, so yeah, I mean, I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of righteous anger, the more I learned throughout the process. But Oh, uh, compassion was really the thing that helped, was like the salve to the balm to not being able to find really answers that we want in this situation. There's going to be multiple truths. There's multiple things you have to be able to hold, and that includes if somebody was a victim who then later became an enabler because of circumstance. And, my grandmother, my mother, my sister, and we are all different generations that had vastly different tools. And I am the most privileged in that way. I also will disclose that I do not have any memories being abused by my grandfather. He was moved out of the state 2 years before I was born, so purely by luck. Um, but I did have a lot of situations of sexual assault later that kind of, helped me put a lot of these pieces together of it. Even if it doesn't happen to you and you're still raised in that family culture, it's very, very damaging when this kind of collective silence exists around something so difficult. So yeah, I mean, I just had to, in my own process with my family, find that compassion that yes, people made horrible decisions, but it was also, it's messy. I mean, that's like my whole message here is like we just need to have compassion and be able to sit with the messiness of it, because there aren't clean answers.
And to sort of stay with the message of messiness, first of all, to appreciate your sharing your own experiences, what did happen
Mhm.
to you, and the way in which, in some complicated way, experiences as an adolescent or a young adult can sort of connect you with things that you didn't experience, but they were in the family story and in the family culture. And that's complicated to understand how that happens. But in the film, that comes across as sort of what led to your starting to ask some questions and to do this deep investigative work. You said, surely we're not the only family. Luke's book, was Elizabeth Letourneau, was called A One in Five. The point being, this is very common. In fact, the tagline of the book's title is, this is a huge public health crisis. But to go to the messiness, you used the word accountability alongside compassion. So uh, I think that's part of where the messiness is. And
Mhm.
if we go back to you, Luke, and to, the work and thinking you've done about, as you said, in air quotes, non-offending pedophiles, is there a way that both accountability and compassion come into play there?
Yeah, and in that one instance, I mean, it's really tricky. And again, people may have a certain level of tolerability or not to kind of, hear certain things, again, based on their own personal experience, which is very understandable. But in terms of having accountability, we should hold anyone who perpetrates harm, especially anyone of age, any adult who perpetrates harm, should absolutely be held accountable criminally, restorative justice, like anything that feels appropriate within the context. It's more complex when it comes to kids because they often kind of perpetrate harm under very different circumstances, and there are different considerations considering their kind of emotional and physical maturity. But if we're talking strictly about people with a sexual attraction to children, in terms of my work, it was relatively kind of easy that I kind of focused mainly on young adults who had a sexual attraction in children, people who were like 17, 18, 19, 20, and also easy in the sense that they did not want to cause harm and they were just trying to navigate this. So just in terms of answering that question, in terms of accountability and compassion, I think if you have the ability and the capacity to do so, I think we can have compassion for anybody. It'd be really terrible, in my perspective, I would wake up at the age of 16 and realize I was sexually attracted to an 8-year-old, especially back when I wrote this first story back in 2012, when there was almost nothing for them. And there's certainly things out there now, but not as much as there should be. So yeah, I just think until you kind of cross over into actual behavior and harm somebody else, I think we should have compassion and try and help people, especially those that do pose a risk, and who do want help.
Thank you, Luke. I have many more questions. The chat is on fire, as is the Q&A box. I want to come to some of them, and before doing that, I do want to get back to the messiness of compassion and accountability. Spoiler alert, in the film, you do go to one of the women who, as a child, was sexually abused by your grandfather, who was willing to be on camera and talk with you about it. And in a couple of different ways, the concept of forgiveness comes up. And it comes up in your conversation with your mother as well. And she actually used the other F word to refer to the concept of forgiveness. And so I think that's worth digging into because, there are many other places where people talk about forgiveness as a process of healing, and yet that too is complicated.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is a big one. I was raised very evangelical Christian, and I am no longer, but most of my family are practicing. And I mean, there's even complexity around that. It's something that caused me immense harm, but it's also something that I think gave my family a moral compass they needed because the patriarch of the family was my grandfather. So I understand how it saved their lives and made them feel restored in a certain way. So I have to, respect that to the degree that it has helped them. But the thing about forgiveness is we all know that same word, but there's so many different definitions of it and interpretations of it. And in my family, it was obligatory. It was you have to forgive him, or else that sin is on your head, I guess you'd say. And it's almost like waiting. I mean, it's like this ultimate victim blaming thing. It's just like it was wild to me, and I really, really disagreed with it, but it was something that was really hard to get past and to like talk to my family about this because they're like, "Oh yeah, we've forgiven him because we've like had to." Um, so yeah, like, and he also, used his faith to forgive himself and absolve himself from anything. It was kind of this, well, I just asked God for forgiveness, rinse and repeat. So I just saw these different interpretations of forgiveness play out and ultimately how faith, these like certain beliefs were enabling it, enabling the silence. I had one person who is in the film, actually, the chiropractor who laid hands on Grace. He had pulled me aside and told me, off camera, that he didn't understand why I thought it was my place to ask these questions because it's all in God's hands, and so where am I to judge? So yeah, came up against that a lot. Also very complex.
Right. And one more reason why there is silence.
Hmm.
right? You were actually being told that there are religious instructions in some faiths to be silent. And actually, in that segment, um, you illustrate or you allude to the ways in which people were quiet who could have spoken up, and people didn't look into things that they could have looked into that could have um, uh, prevented further harm. And that
Mhm.
gets to one of the questions in the Q&A box, which is about are you advocating for certain kinds of policy, for certain kinds of sentencing strategies? And maybe we can go to you first, Luke, on that question.
Oh gosh, Josh, you're gonna get me into trouble. No, again, I just
That's my job. That's my
I
job.
know, yeah. It's a tricky question. And again, I do support accountability. And that's not just kind of, just saying it for the sake of things. I do think people should be held accountable. I think what that looks like can be very different. I think it should be criminal justice accountability in the vast majority of adult perpetrated cases. But then if a victim survivor wants restorative justice, that's, an avenue I think that's still very people bristle at. In terms of actual strict policies, what I'm comfortable saying in this kind of like without having a chance to speak about it with a lot of nuance in a brief way is that I think a lot of our kind of I'm thinking more about sex offender civil commitment, the sex offense registry and public notification. Something I'm very comfortable saying that children are placed on registries. Children have no place on registries, especially public registries. There's been zero evidence to show that it's effective in improving public safety, and it causes great harm to kids. And so I think applying adult policies upon children is very damaging and does nothing. It makes us feel like we're doing something when we're not. So yeah, in terms of changing things, I think one thing again, I feel comfortable saying publicly is kids should not be placed on sex offense registries.
And in the film, it's clear that your grandfather, Amanda, was able to basically start with a clean slate just by leaving the state multiple times. So, do you have something you'd like to add to what Luke said about what you'd like to see in terms of legislation to prevent harm or sentencing?
I I I will say that there is always going to be a criminal justice approach to accountability in this case. I don't feel comfortable. Like I don't know exactly what the best solution is beyond I mean there's a pretty big example in our country right now where we could be holding some accountability. We could really set an example there. But yeah, it's for me, I felt like I didn't want to take that approach with the film because there's so many films being, wow, look at all those emojis. Um, I didn't want to. I felt like that was a conversation that had been had a lot of times, but and what I could offer is that we need to be thinking about this ahead of time. We need to be looking at prevention hand in hand with a criminal justice approach to accountability. Like they need to go hand in hand. I don't feel super qualified to speak on the other side, but I have not had the privilege of being able to plug my ears and ignore the realities when you are related to somebody who has abused countless children. And you cannot just kill him or put him in a wood chipper. Like you have to, what are you going to do? So I kind of, went backwards and was like, well, what could have been done? What could have been done that we can do now that makes a space, and there are some organizations that do this, like Stop It Now and through ATSA, where giving a place for people with the attraction to kids, a place to go where there is resources that can stop the abuse to begin with. That's kind of the hill I've chosen to die on.
Thank you. We want to be sure to get to more about prevention in our remaining time. Before going there, I want to pick up on two chat comments that I'll read to you that connect with what you just said about this was your grandfather.
Mhm.
And uh, that gives you a very important perspective on the complexities, the messiness, and the nuance. And so one of the comments is, it's a bit shocking that Grandpa was willing to talk about it. It's been my experience personally as well as professionally that abusers refuse to validate or outright deny the abuse. And uh, the question is, was there a process you had to go through to get him to do so? And before you pick up on that, there's another one that is related, if I can find it now. Um,
I can start on that one if you
you
want.
could start on that one. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Oh, here
Yeah.
it is. Here it is. It's what happens if the person is concealing their actions related to this event, which is also part of the story, right?
Hmm.
Um, so
One of
it's that as well as what's the process. Yeah.
And I absolutely know that he was also concealing some things, like it's not a perfect process. I look, what's wild is that in the 8-year process of making this, the very first thing that I did was interview my grandfather. I did that before I even knew that this was going to be a film. And then that's when I reached out to Luke and was kind of like, oh my God, where do I go from here? Like this perspective is valuable, and where do I begin? But it actually wasn't hard. There he has a lot of narcissism. I suspect that there's some psychopathy at play. He was also quite estranged from my family. He was living down in Florida and nobody was really bothering seeing him. So I think that he really was flattered having questions asked by him by somebody in the family, and I also just approached it with curiosity, like genuine curiosity, like what is going on, dude? Like what happened? Like what was this like for you? I'm a very curious person, which is also why I'm a journalist. So I kind of just I had that degree of both separation of not being a firsthand victim, but also the intimacy of he is a family member, and I had these journalism skills to interview and kind of like hold it together through that. So I think that that goes for him. It goes for kind of anybody what just wants to be heard and to be asked questions with curiosity. I didn't expect him to disclose as much as he did, for sure. That was really difficult. My mom was also there with me in the room, and at points he was disclosing things about her in a very normalized way. It was very, very difficult. But I did the best that I did the best I could.
Yeah, normalized and in the film also to me it seemed minimized. And
Yes,
that
entirely.
sort of goes with what one of the comments was, which is, and it's in my experience and the few pedophiles that I've treated is they kind of live under this delusion that it's really totally fine or even good for the child. Um, and that was kind of, in addition to normalized, just sort of minimized and justified in a way. And that, I think makes me want to ask you, Luke, the same kind of question about this comment in the chat, which is you talk about these non-offending pedophiles and their young people, ages 16 and 19, being able to be open about these urges that they're so worried about acting on and vehemently do not want to act on. Was there some kind of process that they went through or you went through that made it possible for them to be able to talk about it and to see what it was for what it was rather than denying, rationalizing, minimizing, which I think is part of, what I saw in the film you were getting from your grandfather.
Yeah, I mean, the process of the stories I did kind of in the early days, speaking to these young people. I mean, the trust thing was huge. It took me months and months and months and months of talking to people kind of on just messenger kind of systems, and then finally emails, and then convincing them to fly out and meet in person. It was about building trust and letting people know that. I mean, Amanda used a really important word, which I think is useful for all of us in many facets of life, which is curiosity. I'm not a naturally judgmental person professionally, personally, very much so. But no, but professionally, I'm not judgmental. And I was just curious. I wanted to know what their experience was like. What's it like to be a young person with a sexual attraction to kids? And so once I kind of passed that sniff test, I think they opened up, and then yeah, and then they're able to share their stories. And to the second part of the question, there are a lot of mental cognitions that go on, especially around this. A lot of the people I spoke to had used CSAM, formerly known as child pornography, and they didn't see that it's offending. That is a form of non-contact offending, obviously. Um, and or maybe they used it when they were young. I remember there's one case where a kid was accessing CSAM when he was 13 and the kid were like 10. And so they weren't that different in age, but as he grew up and if those age he grew up and the kids in the video stayed the same, that's when he realized he had a problem. So yeah, even inadvertently, one, if they kind of can have these blinders on about themselves and what it means. That's maybe going down kind of a bit too granular, but I think if just talking about this topic, in general through Amanda's kind of documentary, my reporting, and just chatting with you, Josh, today, and everybody in this room, and we're so grateful that people are here. Like just talking about all the different facets, it's such a complicated, just knotted ball, and the only way out of it and to kind of unknot that ball is to talk through it.
So, moving towards a big part of prevention that this film, and I think your book too, is getting to is breaking the silence. One of the questions is, how do you start the conversation with a family member who has hurt you or maybe another family member in this way? How do you start that conversation?
I believe the Moore Center has some resources. Don't I believe the Moore Center put together some resources on how to start those conversations?
Yeah. Yeah. I can try and find that drop in the chat. Yeah, I think we did something in relation to the film, actually. We partnered with
Yeah.
the Moore Center to kind of do a guide on how to talk to your kids about abuse. So maybe Amanda answer that on a personal level, and I'll try and find that link and drop that in the
Yeah,
chat.
it's not easy. It's not easy, but for me, I mean, the lesson that I kind of was freshly dealing with and carrying into this process of making this film was, I had had a transient ischemic attack as a result of trauma I was not dealing with. And that was a huge wake-up call for me that my body was keeping the score. And it felt a little, I mean, this is a little dramatic, but it felt more life or death of like, I have to start. I always imagine like we're all born with these backpacks and we don't really know what's in them or how much we're carrying until we decide to go through them. So I knew I needed to go through my backpack, and the more I found, I was like, "Oh my God, this backpack is very heavy." Um, so yeah, I mean, Luke, do you want to?
You're on
You're
mute.
you're on mute.
Because I was typing. Excuse me, I was kind of half listening. I was finding that link. I dropped in the chat the discussion
Oh,
guide.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to as many, professionals. I had therapists that were helping me the entire time. That's obviously the gold standard, but it's that safety isn't always, it's not always safe to do that. There's a lot of people in really, really, really difficult positions, which is why, again, having hotlines, having resources, also going back to the legal aspect of what could be done. I mean, child advocacy centers. I give keynote speeches with child advocacy centers all the time, and like the work that I'm sure a ton of people in this group are, working for them. It's incredible. It's incredible having a safe space that's trauma informed throughout the like to navigate these conversations that have therapeutic resources. It's essential. Like I think all the time, I didn't even know what a child advocacy center was until I had made the film already. And if that would have been more available for my family, if more kind of public knowledge around, like with PSAs, Luke and I are talking about all the time about wanting to do like PSAs around this. Let's bring PSAs back because people don't know what to do. The only thing that's in the news and that's in conversation are people with power that abuse that power. Where it's far more common every day in our own families, in our own, churches, schools. So anything we can kind of keep doing on that front to just keep the conversation going.
And if I might build on that real quick. Sorry, Joshua, do you want to go?
No, go ahead, Luke. Yeah.
Something that you mentioned, Amanda, I think is really important as well. We were talking about this yesterday, actually, as we were preparing for today. The Epstein files is a big thing in the news that absolutely should be spoken about. But I have some kind of not concerns per se, but I have some issues with some of the coverage because I think, again, he should be held absolutely accountable. He did some really terrible, horrific things. But again, it kind of is drawing the eye away from like the reality of the problem, which is this occurs much more frequently amongst people known to the individual. It occurs more frequently among peers, peers under the age of 18. Up to 70% of child sexual abuse is perpetrated. No, I shouldn't say perpetrated. Up to 70% of child sexual abuse is at the hands of other kids. And so I think, not only talking about this in a very public way, but talking about it in the right way. We can talk about the Epsteins, we should, but then we should also be talking about the grandpas and the uncles and the stepmothers and the coaches, the people that, cause harm to kids. And I think kind of that's what we need to be having conversations, but also having the right conversations.
Yeah, and resources and PSAs.
Um, there, there's a lot of pain and hurt in the chat from the people who are the 1 in 5 who have experienced this themselves that I just want to be sure to honor. Glad you were all with us today. There also was a comment about, it said something like there's so many things in the chat that I can't find where it is, but it said something like, so you're talking about preventing abuse while keeping the abuser around. I think that actually is not what you're talking about, because as you said, you weren't abused by your grandfather because he was, already had fled to another state before you were born. And it's part of the messiness, I think, when it's in families, illustrated by one moment where after you read some messages to your grandfather in the film from some of the people who he abused, the women he abused when they were little girls, you then say to your grandfather something like, can I give you a hug? Your grandfather says, you mean you still want to? So that doesn't mean that you're keeping the abuser around, but it does mean he's still your grandpa, right?
Yeah, and I will contextualize that scene. It is a scene that gets people. Sorry, I keep turning my screen because the sun is chasing me, so I'm just gonna be leaning a little bit. That scene in the film is it was this very culminating moment where my mom and I had collected audio messages from some victims to kind of confront him with and play them for him, and it was a really, really difficult moment. I also knew it was the last time I was going to see him before he died. None of us were we were done. Like, we were really done. And it was just like a very loaded, complicated moment, which is what this is, the reality of this, where, I don't think I mean, I won't spoil the reactions he had to the messages, but it was wild. And then, there was just so much of this he just doesn't get, he just does not understand the impact that he's had. And, he has paid a price for that. I don't know what the price would be, but he has paid a price where we chose to show how he died. And it's a little bit it's very sad and hard to watch, but he died alone. He died very, very much alone. And it depends on every victim has their own idea of what accountability is. And to some, that was very comforting to see him in that position. It's very complicated. And I hugged him just because I didn't really ever feel particular love for him. I wasn't that close to him. I did not have the complicated relationship that a lot of my family had. But I just felt so like it was a very pathetic moment. It was just this like, damn, dude, like this is your life. Like this is what you've done and this is who you are. And I didn't feel bad for him, but it just was like a kind of pathetic moment. And knowing that was the last time I'd ever see him and that he was going to die alone was like, I hugged him, and these moments are very complicated and overwhelming. And we put that in because we wanted to show that complexity. But a lot of people couldn't understand how could you? How could you even talk to him? How could you call him grandpa? I've had all kinds of things. But that's why it's important to keep talking about why these dynamics are so complicated. And I hope that people just are more and more curious to do more listening than yelling on the internet frequently.
Yeah. And part of the talking about it is by getting to the messiness and the nuance, helps people understand why there are silences and why there is denial, what people are afraid of opening up. In the last couple of minutes that we have, can you both say more about how breaking the silence and making the private public actually can be preventive. There's lots of suggestions in the chat about where and how prevention can happen. But just tell us more. We'll go back to you, Luke, first. How you think that actually works, where breaking the silence, making the private public actually um, can reduce the the risk of this kind of harm for children.
Of course, I'll try and make this as brief as possible because I haven't got much time, but it's just such a great question. It's a big one. I think talking about it, like I think in public health, I'm not a public health, but I work with a lot of public health practitioners. The first step to preventing a public health issue is understanding like the shape of something, understanding, what happens under what context in terms of sexual abuse, who's causing the harm, who's being harmed under what contexts. And I think, we kind of, we talk about the Epsteins, we talk about these outlier cases. By sharing kind of personal stories through Amanda's story, through the op doc, we get a better idea of the shape of things. And I think then we can kind of, we again, like, and I'll just plug the book very briefly. In the book that I co-wrote with Dr. Elizabeth Letourneau, there are three parts, and it's a great read. You should all buy it. But the third part actually looks exactly at prevention. And so we kind of break it up into we use what we're calling the child sex abuse prevention matrix, and it looks at what needs to occur before abuse occurs, when abuse is close or imminent or occurring, and what we can do post-abuse, tertiary prevention, which is still prevention. And so we kind of go into, and there's many things we could be doing right now to prevent child sexual abuse, not just something in the future that we hope to reach towards. But again, a big part of that is just kind of understanding the shape of it. Again, like statistically, understanding that 90% of it is at the hands of people known to a child, 70% of child sex abuse is at the hands of other kids. Understanding the realities, including kind of people sharing their stories, it maybe feel like kind of little droplets, but like enough droplets create like a big bucket full of water. And that then, not to, and to gain the weight we need to kind of achieve real change.
Thank you. And the link for the book that you and Elizabeth Letourneau wrote is in the chat. And maybe we will give you the last word, Amanda, on how breaking the silence and making the private public can be an important part of prevention. I love what you said about the shape, understanding the shape. And I do think the film that you've made is super helpful because you see all of the ways in which your grandfather actually eludes detection. And at the same time, why people who actually did know didn't say anything, remain silent.
Yeah. I mean, there are things that, I mean, I'm not encouraging anybody to make an HBO film about their family. It was a wild process. I don't regret it, but it was wild.
Well, I
But,
would encourage everybody to watch it though.
yes,
Yeah.
please watch it. Please watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that the reason I did this was it was so overwhelming. The more I wrapped my head around it, I was like, what can I do? And for me, it was this film, and I felt like even on the days and the years that I didn't want to do it, it was like, well, do I want to be better than the past generations of my family? Do I want to do better? And by continuing to say yes is the way that I was trying to break those, the generational trauma of it all. And I think we all have that power, where whatever sphere that we're in, the more we can demonstrate that compassion and the ability to hold all the complexity around this issue. That is the biggest skill that I can recommend building for anybody is just you have to be able to hold all of these really difficult, contradictory things. In order to know how to best move forward without being fueled by pure rage. There is definitely a place for the righteous anger around this, but we need to channel that towards being productive and setting up these resources for perpetrators, for survivors, so that if things happen or before they happen, people know where to go. And that, by building this network, that is less fearful, I'd say. Like we are all so afraid of this. This is the worst thing that you could ever imagine happening. But the more that you sit with it and are like, okay, well, like it is happening. So what are we going to do about that? I think if we all just look at the ways that we can demonstrate that compassion and that ability to hold the complexity around us, we're on our way. It's already, I think in my own life, am a testament in my family to like, it is getting better. I have been able to do better. And like we have so many resources and tools that my grandma did not have. So being grateful for that and using what we can to just um, try to make everything a safer place for kids.
Luke Malone, Amanda Mustard, you both are such beautiful and inspiring models of holding multiple truths. And I think you've given so many of us so much hope, especially in facing the difficult challenges that we've been talking about and that so many of us are facing in our lives. I hope you all will come back on Wednesday, April 29th, to talk with Terry Real. It's going to be about trauma again. He's an internationally revered family therapist, best-selling author, and expert on male depression and trauma. So come back and find out what boys and fathers are struggling with today and how he helps them reconnect with the strengths they so often don't dare to turn to or don't even know that they already have. And spoiler alert, there is all kinds of trauma underneath the depression that they are struggling with. Again, thank you so much, Amanda Mustard and Luke Malone. It's just been such a privilege to be with you and learn from you. And thank you all for joining us today for this episode of Learning to Listen: Conversations for Change.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Josh and everybody.